Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and using the Simon Says Stamp Beautiful Flowers stamp set yet again. I have done many videos using this set, and then in the new Friendly Frolic release, they released the coordinating wafer dies, which just make me so happy. So of course, I had to pull out the stamp set again. So I have some Ranger watercolor paper here, and this was just a very large scrap that I had in my little folder. I have the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch pre-cut sheets that I use most of the time, but I also have a couple packs of the full size 8 1/2 by 11, and then these larger scraps from that. So I pulled out this piece and I have it in my stamp platform. This is the larger platform, not the travel size. And I am stamping the image with Simon's clear embossing ink. I'd use my anti-static powder tool first, and then I'm using detail white embossing powder. And I'm going to melt this with my heat tool. And then I decided to rotate the piece of cardstock and stamp it a second time. Just thought, why not while I'm here and I have it. The piece wasn't quite big enough that I could just rotate it and stamp it. I realized they were going to overlap in the middle, which you can't really see on camera, but I could see where I had stamped the first one. So I had to kind of creatively shimmy the large stamp around so I could fit it just on the paper. I wanted the whole piece because I wanted to die cut both of these with that large coordinating wafer die. So I was able to fit it on there, so I did the exact same thing. Anti-static powder tool, inked up the stamp with the clear embossing ink, covering it with the detail white embossing powder, and then I'll melt this with my heat tool. So now I'll have 2 images stamped onto the smooth side of this Ranger watercolor paper and heat embossed, which just makes my life a little bit easier. I've said this in a lot of videos. I like the heat embossed images when I'm going to do any type of watercoloring, regardless of the products, because it gives that raised edge, so I don't have to worry as much about things running into each other. Plus, I love the look, especially white on white, of the emboss resist. So I'm using the shimmer powders again. I've done many videos using the shimmer powders, but what I wanted to do this time was be more controlled with them and actually just paint with them instead of sprinkling them onto the backgrounds like I've been doing. So I pulled out this little palette that I've had for eons. They're fairly easy to come by. I'll try and include a link to one in with the rest of my supplies, but this little plastic one I've literally had for, I don't know, 15 years, something like that. But I just gently sprinkled the powders. Again, do not squeeze these bottles unless you want a huge, like, teaspoons worth of powder to come out. You end up with like a big blob. So I just tapped it very gently. You do not need very much. Even what I tapped in here, I still have tons left over, and I painted both these great big huge images with it. So I just tapped it in there, and then I squeezed the water with my little mini water brush here. If you had a little eyedropper, that would work really good too. You don't want to spray on that palette because I've actually done this. It will literally make the powder explode out of the palette and it goes everywhere. So use something like a little eyedropper and just drop a little bit of water in there, or pick it up with a wet brush. Whatever works. You just don't want to like spray when it's sitting in a plastic palette. You'll have a huge mess. So I added my water, and then I'm just picking up those colors with my water brush and painting it onto these images. Really quick and simple. I'm not worrying if I am going outside the lines. I'm okay with it. I just want the color. You still get the shimmer. I mix some of the colors I'm using the Atlantis Burst and Solar Flare for like my green, and like that, adding that yellow just to get it a little more green, because Atlantis Burst is a little more blue, but I wanted to kind of have a little bit more of a green. A light green anyway, so I mixed those colors back and forth when I was doing all the leaves and greenery. For the actual flowers, I used Violet Brocade, which a lot of people love, which I do too. That one has purple, blue, and pink all mixed like together in the little powder particles, so you do get some variation. And then I also pulled out Cherry Bomb because it's just, that hot pink is just gorgeous. So I was just picking up the color with my water brush and painting it on. Really simple. In areas, I would add a little bit more of it just to deepen it, but that's it. Like, I'm not going to go back in and add any more layers, nothing. Just paint while it's still wet. Sometimes I'll layer on that yellow just to, create a bit more of a green. And that is literally it. At the very end, I'll take a bit more of the Solar Flare, the yellow, and I paint that on the centers of the flowers and on the stamens just to bring out a little bit of a different color, but that is literally it. Nothing else. I'm not going to add anything else. And that takes care of all the painting, which did not take very long at all. These images speak for themselves. It's just, it's gorgeous. So after everything was done, I cut apart these images so that I can use this large coordinating wafer die. In the coordinating set, there's this large die for this main cluster, and then there's the 3 wafer dies that'll cut out the 3 individual flowers, which are perfectly sized, the same as the flowers in this cluster, so you could actually stamp those separately and pop them up if you wanted. That would look amazing, but I'm just using the cluster today. So I did that die cutting, and I also die cut some vellum with one of the Simon stitched rectangles, and I have some pattern paper because I thought it would be just nice to add a bit of like a fairly simple pattern paper to my card bases. And then I also die cut several layers of the new Big Happy wafer die, just the word, not the outline. And I'm going to stack 2 of them together with multimedia matte adhesive. So I've die cut them from white cardstock, and I'll have 2 layers stacked. And then I die cut the last half of this sentiment multiple times. So I only have the last half die cut multiple times because I'm planning on layering this over those flowers. I didn't want to fiddle around with foam tape or anything like that. I found this is the easiest way to pop up die cut sentiments without having to try and trim teeny little pieces, because I've done that in the past, and I sit and off camera, because I don't include that in the editing, I will sit and fiddle, you know, trimming the tiniest little pieces of foam tape and frustrated and struggling with it when I could just do this, which is a lot faster. So I ended up doing about 4, I think I did 4 die cut layers of the back half of the sentiment, and I do this twice since I'm making 2 cards, and it didn't take that long really. And then it's got, you know, a bit of weight to it, and it's going to be easy to pop onto my finished card. So after I had die cut both of those sentiments and stacked them together, I wanted just the word birthday, and in the stamp set there is a tiny birthday word, which is great, but I wanted the larger one. So I actually cut apart the happy birthday sentiment. You could just ink up just the one word, but I have no problem cutting my stamps apart. When I go to use it again, if I want both the happy and the birthday stamp, I'll just butt them up together on my block or on my stamp platform, and they'll work just fine. So it just gives me more use out of my stamps when I cut them apart. So that's what I did. And then I'm just going to stamp that word birthday onto the bottom of this vellum rectangle. And I'm going to do this to both pieces. So I used, again, my anti-static powder tool. I stamped the word with the Simon Clear embossing ink, and then added the detail white embossing powder, melted that with my heat tool, and then did that to the second piece. And then I'm going to add a bunch of Simon's foam tape to the back of these flower clusters. I chose the Simon foam tape because it's thinner. I didn't want it as popped up as it would be with like the Scotch foam tape. So I coated the back of that with the foam tape. And then to adhere the pattern paper to my card bases, I'm using my Xyron Mega Runner, covering the back of the pattern paper, and then adhering that to my cardstock bases, which are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, so standard A2 size cards. And the pattern paper is going to completely cover both of my card bases. And then I'm going to use my Mega Runner to adhere the vellum, and I just ran that kind of in a diagonal line because that's going to be covered by the flowers, so you're not going to see any of the adhesive through the vellum because it's going to be covered. And then I peel off the backing to the foam tape, and I'm going to pop this onto my cards. On both my cards, I left all these little pieces that are hanging over the edge. So you can do several things here. You can leave it as is and just deliver the card if it's with a gift or in a gift bag or anything like that. If you want to mail the card, you can either put it in a larger envelope, like a 5x7, or if you only have A2 sized envelopes, I would flip this over and trim off the bits that are hanging over the edge with scissors. That looks great. I've done that a bajillion times. Today I was like, I like how this is for now. And if I change my mind or want to mail these out in a A2 size card, I will just trim these off before I go to mail them, and they'll be totally fine. It looks just fine. Today I was like, I kind of like how this looks with all the little bits hanging off of it. So I just left it. So I'd done that, and then I adhered those sentiments with the multimedia matte adhesive. And then I put the card base back into my stamp platform because I want to stamp the inside. I also love just how this stamp looks, just stamped in colored ink, especially in Distress Oxide inks. Every time I stamp it like this, I want to create cards with just stamping these in different colors. It just looks gorgeous. So I inked up, for the card with the green pattern paper, I used Peeled Paint Distress Oxide ink on the inside. And then the other one, I used Shaded Lilac Distress Oxide ink. So got those both stamped, and then I lined up more sentiments from the same stamp set, and I'm going to stamp that with Simon's Intense Black ink. Just ink that up, stamp that into place a couple times to get a nice intense sentiment that's nice and even. Do that to both of the insides of my cards. And then as a final bit of embellishment, I pulled out some glossy eggshell mix pearls from Little Things But from Lucy's Cards. Gonna put those in my little magic tray and sprinkle those rather liberally onto my card front here, and then I'll adhere them all into place with little dabs of multimedia matte adhesive and pressing them into place with my little jewel picker, and that's going to finish off these cards. So I did try to show the shimmer from these powders by using my flashlight on my phone. It's really hard to show in cameras and on video, especially when I'm like filming part of it in the middle of the night and filming during the day and different things. It's just hard to pick it up, but you can kind of see it there. Right there, that bit of shimmer, really pretty. And the powders, FYI, in my palette, they just dry. You can reactivate it with water. Like I said, I still have lots left over. I could paint multiple pieces. So for now, I'm just going to leave them in there. And then the next time I go to use them, I can just reactivate it with water and paint away, and it's good to go. So I will have links, as always, to all of the supplies I used in the description box below the video, as well as on my blog. I'll have links to the other videos I did with the shimmer powders and the stamp set, etc. That'll be at the end as well. So you can check that out if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye!